They used to say that if you want to watch an empire die in slow motion, all you have to do is follow the money. And right now, the money in Dubai is doing something nobody dared to predict. It is leaving. Not trickling out quietly through the back door, but vanishing in broad daylight in the kind of numbers that make serious economists go silent mid-sentence. 80,000 hotel bookings erased in a single week. A cancellation rate at DXB pushing past 43%. Supercars lined up in airport parking lots, blanketed in desert dust, keys still sitting in the ignition, their owners already gone. When a city built on the promise of infinite wealth starts hemorrhaging this badly, the world has a choice. It can look away and call it a blip. Or it can look closer and face the truth that has been hiding in plain sight for years. Today we are going to look closer. We are going to walk through every layer of this collapse, from the frozen runways to the emptied hotel corridors, from the ghost streets of downtown to the migrant labor camps, where the real human cost of this dream is finally becoming impossible to ignore. Because what is happening in Dubai in 2026 is not a temporary setback. It is the final reckoning of an economic model that was always built to shine and never built to last. Let us start where the cracks first became impossible to deny. The airport. Dubai International was not merely an airport. It was a statement, a declaration to the entire world that this was the city where all roads led, where capital gathered, where ambition landed and checked in and spent freely. 95.2 million passengers passed through its terminals in 2025. That number was announced with the kind of pride usually reserved for military victories. And then March 2026 arrived, and within its first 3 weeks, more than 37,000 flights were wiped from the departure boards. Gone. Not delayed, cancelled. The logistics platform Cirium tracked the carnage in real time, and what it revealed was not a weather event or an operational glitch. It was a systemic freeze. Western carriers began suspending routes one after another. British Airways, Virgin Atlantic. The reasoning was identical across every boardroom that made the call. The cost of risk insurance had spiked so dramatically that operating in and out of Dubai was no longer commercially defensible. When the airlines that built their reputations on connecting the world to this city decide the equation no longer works, you are not dealing with turbulence, you are dealing with a structural breakdown. And yet Terminal 3 remained crowded. People were still moving through those halls in their thousands. But if you watched the faces and paid attention to what those people were carrying, the picture told a very different story. These were not investors arriving with capital and ambition. These were not tourists clutching itineraries for the Burj Khalifa or restaurant reservations in DIFC. These were people trying to leave. The energy in those terminals had completely reversed, and the most telling evidence of that reversal was not a data point or a financial report. It was sitting in the long stay parking lot, row after row, layer after layer of luxury machinery gathering sand. More than 2,000 supercars abandoned. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, left behind like luggage that weighed too much to carry. Their owners did not sell them, did not arrange collection, did not even leave a note. They simply walked away because when a system begins collapsing around you, a $200,000 car becomes less valuable than a one-way flight out. Tourism revenue was evaporating at an estimated $600 million per day, and the Al Maktoum mega airport project, the one that was supposed to replace DXB entirely by 2032, the one designed to cement Dubai's position as the undisputed center of global aviation, suddenly had no clear timeline and no clear future. The runways fell silent, and with them fell the first and loudest illusion. From the airports to the hotels, and the story does not get lighter. It gets heavier and considerably more expensive. Dubai's hospitality industry was never just about accommodation. It was the physical embodiment of the city's brand promise. Stay here and feel what unlimited money looks like when it is turned into marble floors, infinity pools, and staff ratios that ensure you are never more than 30 seconds from whatever you desire. That promise drove occupancy rates above 80% as recently as the final quarter of last year. By March 2026, those rates had cratered to below 15%. Not 60%, not 40%, 15. The kind of number that does not just represent an economic downturn. It represents the hospitality sector's central nervous system shutting down. The 5-star properties, the 7-star properties, places that once had waiting lists measured in months and price tags measured in absurdity, now stood largely empty. Their lobbies immaculate. Their restaurants fully staffed and fully silent. The newly opened Jumeirah Marsa Al Arab, one of the most anticipated luxury debuts in the city's recent history, found itself facing an almost poetic cruelty. Born to showcase the very pinnacle of what Dubai could offer, opened directly into a vacuum. The ultra-wealthy clientele that these towers were designed to attract, the Russian oligarchs, the Chinese billionaires, the Indian industrialists, did not simply reduce their spending. They stopped arriving altogether. When trust in a destination collapses, it does not retreat gradually, it evaporates. And once the whales exit the water, no amount of discounting fills the space they leave behind. But the cruelty runs deeper than empty rooms. The operational mathematics of these towers were never designed for solitude. The cost of keeping a 100-floor luxury skyscraper climate-controlled, staffed, maintained, and legally compliant in 40-degree desert heat, with zero revenue flowing through the door, is a burden that would buckle most businesses before the 3rd month. High-end food supply chains, the ones that fly in Wagyu from Japan and truffles from Perigord, were reporting event cancellation rates of 75%. The beach clubs along the Jumeirah Strip, once impossible to access without a reservation, made weeks in advance, were greeting the afternoon sun with rows of empty lounges and staff standing at stations with nothing to do. What had been built was not a hospitality ecosystem. It was a series of concrete balance sheets dressed in marble and chandeliers, and the moment the numbers stopped working, the illusion underneath became visible and undeniable. Out on the streets, the story shifts from spectacular collapse to something quieter and, in many ways, more chilling. Because the real signal that a city is in genuine distress is not what the hotels and airports are doing. It is what the people are doing, and what the people of Dubai were doing in early 2026 was leaving. Quietly, systematically, and in numbers that the city's authorities had every reason not to advertise. The UAE Federal Statistics Center recorded 127,000 residents' visa cancellations in the first quarter of 2026 alone. That is not a rounding error. That is not normal population churn in a mobile city. That is a mass exodus. An estimated 40,000 senior professionals and middle managers, the people who ran the legal firms, the financial institutions, the real estate agencies, and the logistics networks, had vacated their positions and departed. They took their expertise with them, and more critically, they took their spending. The restaurants they frequented, the schools their children attended, the cars they leased, and the apartments they rented. All of that economic activity, the kind that does not show up in sovereign wealth fund reports, but quietly powers the fabric of a functioning city, simply stopped. Downtown Dubai, which was never supposed to feel empty because emptiness contradicted everything the downtown project was built to represent, began showing its bones. The streets around the Burj Khalifa, typically a river of tourists and residents and weekend crowds, took on a different texture. The shops were open, the lights were on, but the density of humanity that gives a luxury district its energy and its legitimacy was thinning noticeably. Sheikh Zayed Road, one of the world's most recognizable urban corridors, that extraordinary strip of architectural ambition stretching between towers that compete with each other in height and audacity, was beginning to feel like a stage set between shows. The infrastructure of spectacle remained. The audience had started to drift toward the exits. This demographic unraveling is not accidental. It is the entirely predictable consequence of building a city on a population that was never intended to stay. 85% of Dubai's residents have always been expatriates. Professionals who came for the tax advantages, the salary premiums, and the lifestyle proposition, fully aware that their presence was conditional and transactional. The moment that transactions stopped making financial sense, the calculation changed overnight. Loyalty to a city is built over generations, through schools and neighbors, and the intangible weight of belonging. Dubai never offered that. It offered opportunity, and when opportunity dried up, the population that had been optimized to seek it went looking elsewhere. The real estate market, which was the crown jewel in Dubai's economic narrative and the primary mechanism through which the city sold its future to global investors, was next to show its fractures. And the fractures were not hairline. Valuations in some of the city's most prestigious developments were falling by 12% week over week. Not 12% annually, weekly. Projects that had been pre-sold to international buyers on the promise of a certain trajectory, on floor plans and renderings, and the implied guarantee that Dubai only ever went up, were beginning to look like something else entirely. The off-plan market, which had been a machine for generating forward revenue against assets that did not yet exist, stalled. International buyers who had been in the pipeline quietly withdrew. Local developers who had leveraged aggressively against future sales suddenly found themselves holding enormous liabilities with no clear path to resolution. The iconic symbols began to show their vulnerability in ways that felt almost symbolic in their timing. The Burj Khalifa, which had been treated for years as effectively price-immune, found its surrounding developments facing valuation pressure that its brand was no longer able to absorb. The Palm Jumeirah, that extraordinary feat of engineering that was supposed to demonstrate what human ambition could do to geography itself, was watching some of its properties move sideways and downward in a market that had only ever been sold on one direction. And the filming bans. The quiet, barely publicized restrictions on media crews and travel content creators operating in certain parts of the city were noticed by exactly the global community that was supposed to keep funding Dubai's image. When a city that built its identity on being photographed starts restricting photography, the message is unmistakable. The authorities knew what uncontrolled images of empty streets and darkened hotel lobbies would do to international sentiment, and they moved to limit the damage. But in 2026, controlling images is considerably harder than it sounds, and the information leaked out anyway, carried by the very professionals who were packing up and leaving. Beneath all of this, beneath the cancelled flights and the empty hotel rooms and the falling valuations and the departing expats, there is a legal architecture that transforms financial distress in Dubai into something that goes beyond a bad investment. For decades, the city marketed its legal environment as a feature: clean, efficient, predictable. What the marketing materials did not emphasize was that the same legal system which protected your assets on the way up could trap you completely on the way down. In Dubai, a bounce check is not a civil matter. It is a criminal offense. Defaulting on a loan is not a negotiation to be had with a bank. It can mean an arrest warrant and an exit ban, executed swiftly and without the kind of procedural delays that exist in Western legal systems. The result was a category of resident that has no equivalent in most economies. People of genuine, significant wealth trapped, unable to liquidate assets fast enough to cover their obligations, unable to leave the country because their name was attached to a financial instrument that had gone wrong. The supercars in the airport parking lots were not abandoned out of carelessness. Now they were abandoned by people who understood that leaving behind a $300,000 car was cheaper than staying and facing what the legal system had waiting for them. The financial residency rules compounded the trap. Ultra-high net worth individuals who had relocated to Dubai specifically to establish their tax residency found themselves squeezed from both directions. Stay in Dubai and watch the systemic risks consume whatever they had built, or leave and trigger the 45-day rule that could reactivate their tax obligations in the jurisdictions they had worked so carefully to leave behind. It was a genuine vice, tightening from both sides, and the people caught in it had no good options. Restructured debts in the city's distressed real estate segment were climbing toward figures that threatened to strain the domestic banking system's ability to absorb the shock quietly. The administrators and legal professionals who had positioned themselves as facilitators of Dubai's frictionless financial ecosystem were now explaining to their clients very carefully that there was no clean exit. Only a managed one at best. And then, underneath all of this, in a layer of the city that almost never appears in the promotional materials, in the labor camps of Al Quoz and Sonapur and the industrial districts that the tourist itineraries never reach, the human cost of this collapse was accruing in ways that dwarf anything happening in the hotel towers or the real estate market. The migrant workforce that built Dubai, that literally constructed every tower and every road and every artificial island with their hands, represents close to 90% of the city's actual labor force. They earn, on average, between $300 and $500 a month, in a city where a hotel dinner can cost more than their monthly wage. The kafala sponsorship system that governs their presence in the country ties their visa status directly to their employer. If a construction firm freezes operations because its real estate clients have stopped paying, those workers do not simply become unemployed, they become stranded. Their ability to remain in the country, to access their wages, even to leave without legal complications, all of it runs through an employer who may now have nothing to offer them. Reports from independent journalists and NGO monitors describe camps where food and basic sanitation were becoming genuine concerns, where the remittance transfers that supported families in India and Bangladesh and the Philippines were stopping, not because the workers chose to stop sending money home, but because there was no money left to send. The collapse of a luxury economy has a way of distributing its costs very unevenly. The billionaires who built their wealth here had options. They could leave, even if leaving was complicated. The people who built the buildings those billionaires profited from had almost none. Dubai in 2026 is confronting something it was architecturally incapable of confronting gracefully, which is the question of what it actually is beneath the surface. Strip away the tax incentives and the residency programs and the property launches and the record-breaking statistics. Strip away the towers and the supercars and the 7-star hotels and the manufactured islands. What is the economic core that remains? What does this city make, grow, or produce that would give it gravity if all the transient capital decided tomorrow to go somewhere else? The honest answer to that question is what makes the situation so serious. Dubai became extraordinary at attracting capital, at circulating capital, at converting capital into concrete and spectacle. But circulation is not production and spectacle is not a foundation. When the global risk environment shifted, when the geopolitical calculations that made Dubai feel safe and lucrative began to reverse, the city discovered that the loyalty of the ultra-wealthy is entirely conditional. Not personal, not permanent, conditional. The Dubai dream was a remarkable thing while it lasted. It convinced some of the most sophisticated financial minds in the world that a desert city could become a permanent center of gravity for global wealth simply through the force of ambition and the right set of regulatory incentives. It convinced governments, developers, and individuals to commit billions to an idea rather than an economy. And for a time, the idea worked. But ideas built on leverage and transient capital and the suppression of the structural questions beneath the surface eventually faced the bill. And the bill, arriving in the early months of 2026, is substantial. Not just financially. The damage to the city's image as a safe, stable, predictable place to park wealth and build a life may outlast the financial losses by years. Because image, once broken in the minds of the global elite, rarely recovers on the timeline that the people who relied on it were hoping for. What remains in the desert now is a question that goes far beyond balance sheets and occupancy rates. It is a question about what we value when we choose where to build our lives and our money. Whether the promise of zero tax and unlimited luxury and a legal system optimized for wealth creation can substitute, long-term, for the things that actually make a place worth living in. Community, accountability, a relationship between the people at the top of an economy and the people at the bottom that is not purely transactional. Dubai ignored those questions for decades because the numbers were too good to allow them in. In 2026, those questions are no longer waiting politely outside the door. They are already inside the room. What do you think is actually waiting on the other side of this? Is there a version of Dubai that rebuilds on a more honest foundation, or is the model itself the problem? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is a conversation that deserves more than one voice. If this kind of analysis is valuable to you, share it with someone who still believes the dream is intact. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the shifts happening in the global economy right now are moving faster than most people realize, and the next investigation is already underway. Everything discussed here is grounded in economic data, geopolitical context, and analytical frameworks current to early 2026. It is designed to provoke thought and serious discussion, not to serve as financial or legal advice. Your own decisions should always start with your own independent research.